The clock struck 4, and the church bells chimed, echoing a promise that was about to be broken. Everyone was there, family, friends, a sea of expectant faces. Everyone, except the groom. Raheem was gone. Inside the church, Sarah sat in her pristine white dress, her world shrinking to the size of the phone in her trembling hands. Her family's whispers were a dull roar in her ears. Her friends couldn't meet her eyes. Then her phone buzzed. A single gut-wrenching message: "I'm sorry. Please forgive me." That was it. No call, no explanation. Just a void where Raheem used to be. The man she loved, the man who had pleaded for her hand in marriage, had vanished on the one day he was supposed to promise her forever. The silence that followed was louder than any storm. 2 days later, Sarah found him. He was sitting on the steps of his mother's house, his eyes red and swollen, still wearing the crumpled suit from the wedding that never was. The sight of him, so broken and lost, chipped away at her anger, leaving only a deep, aching hurt. "Why, Raheem?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, afraid it would crack. "You loved me. You begged me to marry you. And then you disappeared." Raheem looked up, and his voice was raw with unshed tears. "I didn't vanish, Sarah. I went to see my father." One last time, Sarah's brow furrowed in confusion. "Your father. He passed away years ago, Raheem." He nodded slowly, a ghost of a man haunted by the past. "He left me a letter. My stepmother found it, tucked away in an old box. She gave it to me the morning of the wedding." He pulled a worn, torn letter from his pocket. The paper was stained, a testament to the rain and the tears that had fallen on it. "The letter said he wanted me to visit the old family house before I started my new life with you." He began to read from it, his voice trembling. "Son, if you're reading this, I may already be gone. But before you promise your life to someone wonderful, I need you to do one thing for me. Forgive me for not being the father you needed." Raheem looked at her, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I thought I could go, read it, and be back in time. I swear I did, but when I got there, I couldn't leave." It was like he was still there, in every dusty corner, in every creaking floorboard, waiting for me to forgive him so he could finally rest, so I could finally be free. Sarah stared at him, a storm of emotions raging within her, like anger, hurt, confusion, and a flicker of pity she hated to feel. "And you didn't think to call me? To tell me you were wrestling with ghosts while I was waiting at the altar?" His head dropped in shame. "I couldn't," he whispered. "My hands were shaking. My mind was a mess. How could I face you, my future, when I was covered in the dirt of my past?" They didn't speak again for 3 long years. 3 years of deafening silence. Sarah packed up her life and moved to a new city, trying to outrun the ghost of a wedding dress hanging in her closet. She poured herself into her work at a small community clinic, healing others in an attempt to mend her own fractured heart. She built a new life, brick by painful brick, on the foundations of what had been shattered. Meanwhile, Raheem stayed behind, a prisoner of his own guilt. He moved into his father's old, neglected house and began to restore it, piece by piece. He sanded floors, patched roofs, and painted walls, as if fixing the broken structure could somehow repair the damage he had done to his own life, to Sarah's life. He was rebuilding the house not just with wood and nails, but with repentance and regret. One cool evening, as Sarah was locking up her clinic for the night, a little boy with bright, curious eyes walked in. He was holding a carefully folded paper airplane. "My dad said to give you this," he said, offering it to her with a shy smile. Sarah took it, her heart giving a strange, unfamiliar lurch. She unfolded the paper, and her breath caught in her throat. It was Raheem's handwriting. The elegant, familiar script she thought she'd never see again. The note was short, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. "If you ever forgave me, I'm still at the house, the one with the red gate. 3 years, a chasm of silence, and now this." A paper airplane sent by a child, carrying a message from a past she had tried so hard to bury. Her heart didn't just sink, it plummeted. But beneath the rush of old pain, a tiny, stubborn spark of curiosity ignited. She drove for hours, the hum of the engine a steady rhythm against the frantic beating of her heart. When she arrived, the house was unrecognizable. It was no longer the derelict building from her memories. It was alive. Warm light glowed from the windows, and the faint, joyful sound of children's laughter drifted out into the night air. The broken-down fence had been replaced by a sturdy one, with a freshly painted red gate that swung open as if waiting for her. Rahim stepped out onto the porch, and the years fell away and crashed down all at once. He was older, his face etched with lines of sorrow and experience, but his eyes held a calmness she'd never seen before. He was holding the hand of the same little boy who had delivered the message. "You got my message," he said, his voice soft, not a question, but a statement of quiet hope. Sarah's gaze flickered from Rahim to the child, a silent question hanging in the air. "Yours," Rahim nodded, a sad smile touching his lips. "His mother passed away last year. She was a patient at the clinic I opened here. I promised her I'd raise him as my own." A heavy silence settled between them, filled with the ghosts of what-ifs and the reality of what was. Then Sarah whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "So, this is your new life." "No," Rahim said, his voice firm, meeting her gaze without flinching. "This is the life I built after losing everything. After losing you, but it's not complete. It never could be, not without forgiveness." Tears she didn't know she was holding back welled in her eyes, blurring his image. "You missed our wedding, Rahim," she choked out, the old wound tearing open. He nodded, his own eyes glistening. "I know. It's the greatest regret of my life. But in the years since, I never stopped showing up for the love that came after. The love for a boy who needed a father. The love for a community that needed healing." Sarah knelt, her gaze softening as she looked at the little boy who was watching them with wide, innocent eyes. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Adam," he smiled, a bright, gap-toothed grin. "Dad says you're the reason he believes in second chances." Sarah looked back up at Rahim, the man standing before her, holding the hand of a child he had chosen to love. And for the first time in 3 years, she didn't see the man who broke her heart at the altar. She saw the man who had spent every day since learning how to heal, not just himself, but others. She saw a man who had built a home from the ruins of his past. Sometimes, love doesn't begin at the altar, with rings and vows. Sometimes, it begins much later. In the quiet moment, you learn to forgive the one who never stopped waiting for you to come home. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories about love, loss, and the power of second chances. We'll see you in the next one. After 3 years of deafening silence, Sarah finally crossed the threshold into Rahim's restored life. It wasn't the house she remembered. The walls, once a stark white, now glowed a warm beige, as if holding the memory of sunlight. Outside, the garden exploded with the cheerful orange of marigolds, a stark contrast to the barren patch she'd last seen. And then there was the boy, a whirlwind of energy with dark, curly hair, running in joyful circles on the lawn, his laughter echoing in the quiet afternoon. Adam, her heart gave a painful lurch, a strange cocktail of nostalgia and a deep, gnawing fear. Rahim stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the light. He looked older, his shoulders broader, but the nervous smile was the same one she remembered. "I hope you don't think I was careless with your feelings," he said, his voice a quiet murmur that barely disturbed the air between them. Sarah couldn't meet his gaze, her eyes fixed on the vibrant garden. "I'm not sure what I think," she admitted, her voice tight. 3 years, Rahim. I've lived with it every single day, but I'm here now. That has to count for something, right? Just then, a small, warm hand tugged on hers. She looked down into a pair of bright, curious eyes. "Come see the treehouse, Auntie Sarah," Adam exclaimed, his grin infectious. A faint smile touched Sarah's lips. It was impossible to resist him. This little boy who was a living, breathing piece of the life she'd lost. She let him pull her toward the old oak tree in the backyard, her fear momentarily eclipsed by the simple, uncomplicated joy of a child. In the weeks that followed, Sarah found herself slowly being woven into the fabric of their lives, or rather, into Adam's life. She discovered a hidden talent for making dinosaur-shaped pancakes and an unexpected patience for third-grade math homework. She even found herself genuinely laughing at his terrible, nonsensical jokes. Adam was a bridge, a tiny, warm-handed guide leading her through the wreckage of her past. She fell in love with him easily, completely. But Rahim saw the ghost that still lingered in her eyes. He saw the hesitation in her touch, the wall she carefully rebuilt every time he got too close. One evening, as they sat in the quiet living room watching Adam sleep, the moonlight casting long shadows on the floor, he finally spoke the words that hung between them. "You're afraid to forgive me completely," he said, not as an accusation, but as a quiet observation. "You love Adam. I know you do. And I hope, you care about me. But there's still a wall." Sarah's gaze drifted to the window, to the darkness outside. "3 years, Rahim," she whispered, the words tasting like ash. "You disappeared. You vanished right when I trusted you the most, right when I was about to walk down the aisle to you. How do I know it won't happen again? How do I trust that you won't just leave?" He didn't make excuses. He didn't offer apologies she'd already heard in her head 1,000 times. Instead, he reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle, grounding her. "Because I've spent every single one of those 3 years proving that I can be responsible," he said, his voice raw with sincerity. "Not perfect, not faultless, but present. I built this house back from the studs. I raised that little boy into someone kind and happy. I can't change the past, Sarah. I wish I could. I can only show up now, every single day, and hope you see me." Then one afternoon, just as Sarah was starting to believe him, a letter arrived. The familiar, elegant handwriting on the envelope sent a chill down her spine. Her parents, they had never approved of Rahim, not from the very beginning. Their words were polite, couched in parental concern, but they were daggers nonetheless. "Sarah, we think you should think twice," she read, her hands beginning to shake. "Rahim has already hurt you once. He has proven he is capable of it. He may do it again. Think of your life. More importantly, think of that little boy." Her breath caught. She looked up and saw Adam in the living room, completely absorbed in coloring a picture of a lopsided, 6-legged dinosaur, humming softly to himself. Her parents' words echoed in her mind. Asterisk, think of Adam. Asterisk, could she risk this? Could she risk her own heart, again, for a man who had shattered it so completely? More importantly, could she risk Adam's heart? That night, she couldn't stay in the house. The walls felt like they were closing in, filled with unspoken questions and the ghosts of what-ifs. She sat on the porch alone, the cool night air a welcome relief. The wind rustled through the leaves of the old oak tree, a mournful sound that seemed to echo the ache in her chest. She thought of the wedding dress still hanging in a garment bag in her mother's closet. She thought of the life she had planned, the one that evaporated into thin air. And then she thought of this life, the one Rahim had quietly, painstakingly built while she was waiting, grieving, and trying to forget. Was it possible that both could be real? The next morning, the sun rose on a world that felt different. Clearer, Sarah walked into the house, her decision settled like stone in her gut. She found Adam still in his pajamas and took his small, trusting hand in hers. Together, they walked out to the garden where Rahim was on his knees, tending to the marigolds, his back to them. He seemed to sense her presence, slowly rising and turning to face her. The hope in his eyes was so bright, so vulnerable, it almost broke her heart. "I've made a choice," she said, her voice steady and clear. He held his breath, his expression a mixture of hope and fear. "And," he managed to ask. Sarah didn't answer him directly. Instead, she knelt down to look Adam right in the eyes. "I trust you," she said softly, squeezing his hand. Then she looked up at Rahim. "Both of you. Rahim, I forgive you." She saw the wave of relief wash over his face, but she held up a hand. "But it's not for the man who left me. It's because I see the man you've become, the father you are, the person who is here now." Tears welled in Rahim's eyes as he stepped forward, his face etched with an emotion so profound it left him speechless. "That's all I ever wanted," he whispered, "for you to see me now." Suddenly, Adam let out a whoop of joy. "Yay, we're all together." He cheered, throwing his arms around Sarah's neck. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Sarah laughed. A real, deep, genuine laugh that came from her soul. "Yes," she said, hugging the little boy tight. "Yes, we are." The days turned into weeks, and the weeks bled into months. The three of them fell into a new rhythm. It wasn't perfect. There were days Sarah's old fears would whisper to her in the quiet moments. There were times Rahim's guilt would cast a shadow over his smile. But it was real. It was a life built not on a flawless foundation, but on the hard-won ground of forgiveness and second chances. They went to school plays, had picnics in the park, and built the most magnificent pillow forts the living room had ever seen. They were a family, imperfect and patched together, but happy. Sarah finally understood. Life wasn't about perfect timing or grand romantic gestures. It was about showing up. It was about being present, even when it was hard, even when you were years late. One evening, she sat on the porch, watching Rahim and Adam engaged in a fierce, giggling lightsaber battle with rolled-up newspapers. A profound sense of peace settled over her. "You know," she said softly when Rahim sat down beside her, breathless and laughing. "We missed our wedding, but I think this life is better." Rahim's smile reached his eyes, making them glisten in the twilight. "Yes," he said, taking her hand. "Because we're starting it together. This time without mistakes. Sometimes love doesn't wait at the altar, dressed in white. Sometimes it waits quietly, patiently, in the garden, among the marigolds. For those who are brave enough to forgive, bold enough to begin again." Thank you so much for joining me on this journey today. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories about love, life, and the beauty of second chances. We'll see you next time.